Good evening, everyone. We're here tonight for City Council meeting. It is Monday, November 18th, 2019, and we'll start this meeting with a roll call and determination of quorum.
Nordstrom, Modrick, Roberts, Stroman, Armstrong, Lewis, Lehman, Drury, Evans, Drew. We have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. And now we'll have our invocation tonight. The invocation is being provided by Bishop Troy Carr from Faith Temple. Following the invocation, we'll have the Pledge of Allegiance.
Before I pray, I'd just again like to express my thanks for the mayor and the city council for allowing us to pray before these settings. So again, thank you very much. Let us pray. Dear God of the Bible, we thank you so much for this day. We thank you for our life, our health, and our strength. God, your word says that if we lack wisdom, that we can ask of you. And so I ask that you would give the city council persons tonight the wisdom to make the decisions that are well and good and supported for our community. Bless them in their efforts to do the best for this community. Dear God, we pray for those who are less fortunate in our community, that you would help them with food and shelter and clothing. Again, bless our mayor, bless the city council, bless our governor, bless our president, and dear God, bless the United States of America. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, for liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. Now on to the adoption of the agenda. This is the time when the City Council may adopt the agenda as written, or they may make alterations to it. So would there be a motion on this item?
So moved.
Motion by Armstrong and second by Lewis to adopt the agenda. All in favor of that motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And now we have a couple of presentations, and starting first with Scott Ingman, Executive Director of Black Hills Area Habitat for Humanity, and he's here to talk to us about the Garfield Green Project.
Good evening, members of the council. Just want to again introduce myself, Scott Ingman, Executive Director of Black Hills Habitat for Humanity, and it is a real honor to be with you all tonight. I think most of you are familiar with Habitat's mission, that we seek to create a world where everyone has a decent place to live, and we do that by building homes, communities, and hope. Some of you may know that this affiliate was established back in 1990. There was a group of faithful church ladies who came together to start Habitat, and they did a wonderful job getting it off the ground. And I joined the affiliate 13 years ago, and we've been really blessed to be able to serve all throughout the Black Hills. This graphic doesn't really do it justice, but we do serve from, we've gone as far north as Belle Fourche, all the way down to Edgemont, and then out into the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation with our home preservation program. One of the things I like to highlight, though, is that the homes we've completed, property values are about $16, almost $17 million. About $2.5 million in property taxes paid. By 2025, Habitat's vision is to really serve an additional 150 families here locally and 380 individuals. And we're going to do that through 40 new homes that we want to build and 110 home preservations. And that home preservation space really speaks to those folks that are living in homes that are run down in disrepair right here in Rapid City and throughout the hills, where we can come in and for a modest amount of money we can repair those homes, attack those critical problems, get them safe, and do it very affordably for families. And I apologize for the mistake there on the graphic, but our place in the housing spectrum, as you think about emergency shelter being kind of that initial base level, that would be sort of your cornerstone, your drop-in programs, all the way up to your market rate home ownership on the right. We're kind of about halfway to two-thirds over there, and we really run a program that's basically not subsidizing families. We don't pump a lot of money into those projects specifically to cover a subsidy, but they're families that can afford to pay an affordable mortgage. And by affordable, we're talking about less than 30% of their gross monthly income. So we have to work really hard to keep our costs down, get land at affordable prices, and get those homes constructed as cheaply as we possibly can, while having them be very attractive and meet all the city's stringent requirements. One distinction, though, with Habitat is that we are homeowner focused. So we're not a rental builder. We really focus squarely in that home ownership space, which means that families need to contribute 250 hours of sweat equity per adult, and that means that the first 100 hours really is in construction. They have another 50 hours in classroom with consumer credit, Life Inc., going through Dave Ramsey's program. And then we also offer a home maintenance course as well, so when families are in their homes, they actually know how to take care of them. I think all of us realize that it takes a village really to do a program like Habitat, and so you can see the wide array of types of organizations, stakeholders, if you will, that partner with Habitat. And I would say the city of Rapid City really deserves a bigger circle on that, because we work with the city day in, day out with the building department and planning as well. And I really have to tip my hat to the planning department, who worked really hard to make the Garfield Green neighborhood happen, because we didn't have infrastructure. It was zoned as a school, so of course there were a lot of hoops to get through on that, and the city was wonderful to work with on that. So there's the Garfield School, one of the first photos that came out. I think the Rapid City Journal took that one. But that's the way the school looked when we took it on, and we were actually approached by the owner that we bought it from a few years before we purchased it with the idea of potentially taking on the project, but it was so far beyond our reach, particularly just with the scale of it, but then also the technicalities of the school itself, that we took a pass on it. But continued to think about it, pray about it, and a couple years later the board was in a better place. We were in a better place to take on a project like this, and decided to do that. That was 6 years ago now. But there's our blank slate that we're working with. Of course, the school itself, it is about a 30,000 square foot facility, just under a 2-acre infill site. You know, we had utilities to the school, but we didn't have utilities to all the building sites that we were going to do. So that really was the bulk of the initial challenge, was just the cost of bringing that infrastructure in. And I have to say, despite what might seem really obvious, that you'd have to bring an alley and utilities in, there were some city council members at the time that said, hold on a second, we don't want any more alleys to be responsible for. So I was kind of surprised we had to fight a small battle on that one, but I think sober minds prevailed on that. But as we engaged in the community, you know, we worked with a wide variety of organizations. You can see them listed there. But, you know, out of our discussions, one of the things we heard from the community was that, number one, we wanted to save the school. You know, it really became the idea of tearing the school down to put, you know, a new apartment building or numerous apartment complexes kind of was taken off the table pretty early on based upon our community meetings. The second issue is we really wanted to slow the traffic down. We wanted to try to do everything we could to keep it a residential, pedestrian-friendly neighborhood. The neighbors really favored single-family homes. They wanted to see more of what was already there, but you know, bringing it up a notch or two if we could, and really to try to beautify the neighborhood in the process. And honestly, I was really heartened by the fact that so many of the residents had such community pride. You know, there wasn't this sense like, oh, come and fix our neighborhood. It was more, we have a great neighborhood, can you help us make it even greater? Which I really appreciated. So here's the initial Garfield Green plan. Of course, you can see there's 8 single-family homes there with 2-car garages off the back, and then the school to the south. And we had to go ahead and apply for CDBG funds that were available at the time to do the infrastructure work, and the city graciously partnered with us to provide those critical funds. Here's the project underway. We got those foundations in, and this was kind of a unique deal for Habitat because we worked out the largest contribution ever to Habitat across the city of South Dakota with Superior Homes out of Watertown. And Superior partnered with us on the modular homes that we eventually went ahead and placed on those foundations. But I really liked this visual of the project. Kind of gives you a sense of the scale and all the work that went into it. And here's the project pretty much now. If you were to drive by and see it, or get up in a helicopter, maybe, that's what it would look like. And we ended up with 20, it's really a 20-unit development. Within the school, we have 12 market rate loft apartments, of course, the 8 new affordable homes. And really what that visual you're seeing reflects the fact that we wanted to keep the cars behind, keep it very pedestrian friendly with the sidewalks and the front porches. And some of the neat things that happened along the way was Brian Rice with Connect Home Center was on our board, and he was able to negotiate a contribution of Trex decking on the whole thing, which was really a neat kind of upgrade to the whole development. And of course, some of the cosmetic exterior items that they helped with as well really made it, I think, stand out as a neat addition to the community. But these 12 new the 12 new apartments and the homes will result in about $250,000 in new property tax to the county over here the next 10 years. And here's the visual of the school, of course, from the front. Kind of has a nice, creative, modern feel to it. Bill and Christy Barber were our partners on developing the school. They actually came in and purchased the school from Habitat and led the charge on doing the renovation and the repurposing. And one of the things I think you'd notice if you go there today is you've got 12 different families, a little bit younger, highly professional, mobile folks that have moved into the Garfield neighborhood. The interior of the project we're going to take a look at here was really carefully, very artistically done to shine brightly with the project. Got a few interior shots here for you. Very high ceilings, kind of simplistic loft feel that I think would fit in Minneapolis or Chicago, New York, right here in the Garfield neighborhood. There's the original stage and the original gym that's in the development, and Barber's actually kept that right in the apartment. So it's got a really different creative feel to that particular unit. Some of the units, they put a sort of a mid-level loft sleeping area. You can see the steel I-beams there, taking advantage of all the natural brickwork, wood, and the ceiling joists above really give it a nice warm feeling. So as I said, our thinking is that we've got a project that's going to bring a significant amount of new revenue to the city and to the county. And we did this in light of the fact that about 10% of Rapid City residents are paying more than 50% of their gross monthly income on housing. About 25% are paying more than 30% of their income. So we know what happens then, right? So other things start to go in people's lives when they're paying that much just on housing. So critical life essentials like health, transportation, education can all get compromised and really end up creating bigger challenges in other parts of the city. So as we plan for the future, we have a roadmap really that includes this concept of mixed housing where we see market rate and affordable rentals, but also the affordable home ownership opportunity. But just to put it into context, our mortgage on these homes is running about $350 a month for a mortgage to own that house over 30 years. Of course, the families are then responsible for taxes and insurance above that, which we can't control. But we do everything we can to squeeze that mortgage down to a rate that is really affordable for families, even down to $20,000 a year, depending upon the number of dependents that they have. But going forward, I think, we continue to look for that partnership with the City of Rapid City. And, as you look at that public-private connection, we really look to the city, obviously, for planning. We've thought about and talked about incentive zones. And really, we'd love to see some city direct support for affordable housing in the future. I know there's many, many needs out there. But I think given the data that we've seen from the Black Hills Knowledge Network with a need for 3,500 affordable homes, the need is unmistakably before us. And, I don't see Habitat as the organization to solve the whole problem, but we definitely are here at the table. We want to do more repurposing, more infill, but we want to stay focused on that ownership piece as best we can. And as you're planning, I would just, be encouraging you as a city to be thinking about looking at other models. I know Austin has done affordable housing bonds for a number of years, and I've talked to Ken about those. But, thinking outside the box to raise considerably more money to help bring the cost down on these projects, because, we lean on the private sector, the corporations, the churches, the individuals, to support our mission, but this is highly capital intensive. I mean, you guys deal with construction budgets all the time. For us to do a lot more, it's going to require a significantly more amount of money to get it done. So I would just encourage you to look at some of those other models. I'd be happy to visit with any of you to discuss what Habitat's doing in some other markets to scale. And we really look forward to housing more teachers, more insurance agents, more police officers. I mean, that's actually who's in Habitat homes. And that's who needs our help. I mean, these are the people that are the backbone of our community. So I'll leave you with a challenge. I know some of you on the council are newer. Some of you have been around for a while. But like anything in life, right, nothing gets done unless there's leadership, unless there's individuals that step up and make it your focus. So I don't know if there's anyone on the council right now that says affordable housing is something I really want to champion, but if you're there, please call me, because I'd love to work with you. Any questions?
Okay, thank you, Scott.
Okay.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay, we have another presentation by our very own Darla Drew. This is about her recent trip to Nikko City, Japan.
There we go. All right. Recently, I had the privilege of going to Nikko City, our sister city in Japan. It was a small contingent of 4 people. It was myself, my husband Don Laerdal, Laura Jean Thomas, and Jeff Kaleda. And I'm giving this presentation because we have an opportunity to learn from each other, and that's what cultural exchange is all about. So I'm going to give you a little travelogue. My presentation is going to be a little bit lighter, but I think you'll learn a lot of things about Japan that you'll like, and they should learn some lessons from our city as well. First of all, we got there after a 15-hour plane ride, and I don't need to show you what we looked at like when we got there. So I just started out with our first day. We visited Daycare in Nikko, and Nikko, the daycare is free for all working parents. So I know that's something our mayor and some council members are interested in, early childhood education. So we visited their daycares, which were extremely well run. We also visited their preschool, which is also at no cost. There was approximately 5 teachers in every room. There was a live musician in every room that played for the kids. They put on a presentation for us with 3 songs in English because they start learning English when they're in preschool. And you can see us back there. We're wearing goofy hats that represent Nikko. We've got on some necklaces and things that the kids made us. We got to play some games with them. But overall, their presentations were very well rehearsed. They were very excited to have Americans there. And when we entered each classroom, we usually were greeted with applause. My friend Jean brought a poster. Neil Zetah is a local artist, and he likes to have fun with the dinosaurs. And this is a poster of the dinosaurs that are invading Canyon Lake Park. And so it's kind of a fantasy poster, but it really interested the young kids in why we had dinosaurs that would walk around. But obviously it's a fantasy, and we had to explain that to them. But it represents some of our finest things, and we talked a little bit about Dinosaur Park because some of the students knew about that from their older siblings visiting here. This was very interesting. We got to see the grade schools as well. Now, they're very different in Japan, as you can see. When the kids answer questions, first of all, of the teacher asks a question, they will stand up and pull their chairs out, and then sit back down and pull their chairs in, of course. The students serve lunch in the classroom. So the students are responsible to serve their classmates. And you can see the kids up there with their little chef coats on and their masks, and they serve the other students. Then we were surprised that every student ate every bite. The lunch was about 20 minutes long. You're not able to talk during lunch. And then when lunch ends, a 2-minute song comes on the intercom, and all the kids get out toothbrushes, and they brush their teeth for 2 minutes so they'll get a sense of how long you should really brush your teeth. I thought that was kind of an interesting thing. Then there's a little break, and then the kids come back, and they clean up the school. They move out the desks, they sweep the classrooms, they mop the floors, they clean out the mats that collect dirt as you're coming into the school. And so therefore, they are very invested in keeping their schools clean because they have to clean them. We loved our visit to the schools. I've got to say, our first day when we saw we were visiting schools, we're like, but it was really a great way to understand some of the cultural similarities that are in Japan or the differences. We did a quilt presentation to the mayor. We brought a star quilt from Rapid City, made by a Native American here, and presented that to the mayor. Once again, here we are with the mayor and giving him his star quilt. We wrapped him in the star quilt, which is kind of traditional. They sent our mayor a gift. We've got some Nikko sake here for you, sir. So I don't know if you want to share or not, but
Adjourned.
Since we did taste the sake in Nikko, I've got to say it was great, and it was nothing like a lot of the sakes I've tasted in the U.S. Anyway, we also got to visit their new city council chambers. Yes, it's all cedar. It's Nikko cedar, and in back of the dais there, well, that's where the mayor and the president and vice president sit. There are 24 council members, and the visual in back of us is representative of Kegan Falls. It's very beautiful, and it just opened this year. I was jealous. We had the Nikko City celebration where we got together with the Nikko City Association. As you can see by the food, they really knocked it out of the park. They brought this incredible reception for us, and it was wonderful. And I want to say to anybody considering this trip ever, that once you get into Tokyo and you get picked up by the Nikko Association, you basically spend no money. We decided to stay with a host family, so once again we had no hotel bills, but everything is taken care of, all of your meals, everything, your transportation. They meet you in a van with a basket full of snacks that sometimes are good, and then no, they're good. That was really not fair of me, but they're very different from a lot of the things we eat here. So anyway, we had a great reception for the 25th. It was a lot of fun. It was a big year for them and us. Don and I did some songs while we were there. We played 3 songs for the group just to kind of give it a more celebratory kind of a feeling. If you don't know, Don and I have been in a rock band for like 35 years now. And so, yeah, we did some classic 50s rock and roll for the people there. Well, I guess 60s too. And that's our sister city group all together. There's some host family people in there too, and a lot of the folks you might recognize from coming here on some of the trips from Nikko to Rapid City. This is a beautiful bridge called the Snake Bridge because of some mythology based around it, but we got to go up on that. It's usually reserved, it was reserved only for shoguns and emperors that could walk on that bridge. Now, if you pay, you can go on that bridge and have your picture taken. We went to the horse archery exhibition. It was awesome because they were riding horses and shooting at targets at the same time. And you can see they're dressed in regalia there. That's the guy we got to see on the left. On the right is the mayor of Nikko City, and he took part in these celebrations as well. And so, Mayor, I think that you should ride a horse in something coming up and just kind of show your skills. My kimono. Anyway, this is us getting ready for the 1,000 Samurai March. They put us in, ceremonial kimonos. It was great. The gals had a little bit of trouble with our Western-sized waists. They really tightened those belts up, and you can see from the back we all had nice bows there. And we are standing on that snake bridge right there and getting our picture taken from the back. This is a Togu shrine. That's where we're going up to, the Shogun who united Japan. And this is his shrine, and that's one of the reasons that they're our sister city, because they're very historic. And a lot of tourism happens there because of the history and this Togu shrine and the Shogun who united Japan. That was back in the 1700s, but they had warring factions. He brought them together. And so he's somewhat like their George Washington, and that's how we have some similarities in their tourism. We're a heritage site, and so are they. Once again, going to the Samurai March, you can see they put us up front, which was really cool, and we got to sit down and had a great time. A lot of people were giving us the thumbs up on actually putting on some traditional clothing. Those Summers of the Samurai, there were almost 1,000. They are people that are volunteers from the area. They have all the costumes that are saved from every samurai group in one of the temples up on the temple site. And then they march through, and you can see the little kiddos there on the right-hand side. They also include children in just about everything they do. The Japanese are very children-centric, and it shows. We went to a mountain lake and lunch with our guide Lena, and you can see a familiar-looking fish there. They have trout in their lakes. Once again, introduced. They're not natural, just like they're not natural to the Black Hills, so we have that in common. And there's a beautiful lake where you might think you were in Colorado or even South Dakota, but there we are, and a lake in the mountains. This is one of the shrines again. You can see the beautiful colors that are starting there and in Nikko, and it's one of the most beautiful seasons of the year because they have such lovely vegetation around there. You can see some of it in that picture. This was our bedroom in our home in Japan. The mattresses are on the floor, as you can see. It was a little challenging for my 60-something knees to scoot down to the bottom of the bed and then get up in the morning. But their rooms are very functional. There's nothing there that isn't absolutely necessary. But I have to tell you guys, everything you hear about Japanese bathrooms, showers, and baths are true. They're awesome. They're spectacularly modern. And showers are for cleaning. Baths are for relaxation. So when I took a bath in this Japanese home, I found that it's temperature controlled. You don't have to keep running hot water to keep it hot. They're very deep. It's almost like going to a spa when you're in their home. And they like it that way because it is for relaxation. And so it just keeps it at a 90-degree temperature and continually filters the water so it's always clean. So I did love the Japanese bath styles. Here we are in Edo Wonderland, which is kind of their Williamsburg, I guess, of Japan. It's a 16th century village, and everything is very authentic, and we visited the Edo Wonderland one morning. We were arrested while we were there. I don't think they would keep us long, Chief Jegaris, with those ropes around us, but that was an arrest that was going on because we'd seen a robber and we didn't report him in. We saw some ninjas there. It had a fabulous ninja show, and of course we got to pose with the ninjas. It was a lot of fun. And Tobu World are detailed miniatures of buildings, famous buildings from around the world. You can see they're pretty big size. And they also have bonsai trees around them. They have 20,000 bonsai trees in this park, and it adds to the illusion of everything being very to scale. Okay, so Japanese food. I'm eating a shaved ice there. They brought this huge thing, but it's like they shave it from ice from the lake that you just saw, and it's so light and fluffy. It's just like it was like eating a whipped chocolate cloud. It was great. I was a little afraid of how big it was, but I ate it all. I'm a trooper that way. And then we see the children there with the children's portion of ramen. You can see it's pretty big. And down in the corner, you can see us having a dinner. It's a sashimi tuna, raw eggs, and some yakitori chicken. Yeah. So I was the only one that was brave enough to do the egg on that round. But anyway, and I lived to tell the tale. This is Kegan Falls. It's one of their most beautiful sites in all of Japan. And you can see there, we got there shortly after the typhoon, so it was in full bloom. It was just beautiful. All the tributaries around Kegan Falls were beautiful. And that's my friend Jeannie and I with our guide Lena, who I met last year. She came and stayed with us while they had their students here. She was one of the chaperones. So that gave me an inn in Nikko, which was really great. And this is Goodbye Nikko. We went on the bullet train back to Tokyo. There's our host families. There we are leaving, saying goodbye. And it was more impactful than I thought it'd be. I was really, really sad to say goodbye to those folks because we had such a great time. And just in case you're wondering, I did go do karaoke with my host family, Don and I. And it's very different from our experience here. It's in a big complex. You go into a single room. And you just sing with the family in a small room. They can bring in colas and food and things like that. My family cranked the heck out of that system. I mean, it was totally loud. The microphones were feeding back, and then they turned it down just a little. And I asked Jeannie about her family, and she said same thing. They love it loud. They love their karaoke super loud in a small room. So that's our goodbye to Nikko. And I guess I want to say a few things about the cultural exchange. They do a lot of great things in Nikko with tourism, and we do that here too. They do great things with their schooling and their daycare. But one of the questions I was asked from their council people when I was there was, are your young people leaving? Because they're leaving us, and they're going to cities that are close by with jobs and more adventure and things for young people to do. And I was so proud to say to them that no, we're growing. Our town is growing. We're still keeping people here. And that's, I think, because it started 30 years ago when we started paying attention to our quality of life. And Leadership Rapid City was a big step in that. We started developing leaders that we'd need in the future. A lot of you are probably products of that program. I know I'm one. And then also, we had people that looked at our downtown and believed in it and started putting in large and successful businesses like Prairie Edge, the Firehouse Complex, and the always stalwart Elk Theater and others that kind of kept our downtown alive. So it brought in more people that would invest in downtown. Our Main Street Square Art Alley Summer Nights and the new monument show that we are expecting young people to stay here. We're expecting more people to live here. And so I would say that we have a lot to share with our counterparts when they get here, and to talk more about how we can help them understand that they can't start 30 years ago like we did, but they can start tomorrow. And those are some of the important lessons I learned on this trip about cultural exchange. I hope to do more presentations like this one and encourage other people to go on this Nikko trip. I think we can do better than getting 4 people to go. And I hope to do that through more educational sessions like this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Darla. Good job. Okay, getting on with the agenda. Next is general public comment. We don't have any general public comment. Maybe we do. Thank you.
Since you're going to be out of town this week, I guess this is mine.
No, we don't have any general public comment items, so we'll move on to non-public hearing items 3 through 40, and we have no items for the public comment on items 3 through 29, so we'll handle consent items next, 3 through 29. Do any council members have items 3 through 29 that need pulled off of the agenda? If not, could we have a motion? We have a motion from Lewis to approve the consent items and a second from Armstrong. All in favor of that motion say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. Motion carries. Okay. On to non-consent items, items 30 through 40. We'll open public comment on those items. We have a few speaker requests. On item 34, Mike Derby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name is Mike Derby. I'm the owner of Canyon Lake Resort, and I'm here on behalf of item 34, ADUs. And before I provide a handout, I just want to say that except for one small item, I'm in support of the ADU as it's written. As a matter of fact, I bought my mom's house. She's lived there 51 years, and I'll probably be one of the first people to apply for a granny flat. So just so you know. But I do have a handout, Mr. Mayor, if I could provide that. In regards to item 34, ADUs, my concern is in regards to item M, not intended for sale or for short-term rentals. And currently, the language states it shall only be rented for a term of more than 28 days. And I'd like to propose that we increase that time period to 90 days. And I think it's a win-win for not only for the ADUs, but for the hospitality industry. Providing you, I'm on the Visit Rapid City Board. I am not here representing Visit Rapid City Board, but I provide you some information that were provided at those meetings. And it shows the ADU, the average daily occupancy, the revenue, and at the bottom, I'm sure next year is going to be better, but here's what's happened in Rapid City in the last year. A year ago, we had 4,000 rooms. As of today, we have 4,300. You can see on the bottom of the page, it says a 7% increase in rooms. So we have almost 300 more hotel rooms in Rapid City than a year ago. The downside is with, blame it on weather, construction at Mount Rushmore, the proliferation of Airbnbs, whatever, actual number of rooms, the demand went down 0.5% this last year. So my concern is, how do we have an affordable housing component? Because we want affordable housing, but yet if I feel 28 days is too short and should be longer for 90 days, you're creating, I believe, a loophole that would allow people to rent ADUs 12 times a year, and that takes it out of the affordable housing component. So you can support the industry, and you can make sure affordable housing happens with ADUs at the same time. And I think 90 days is a good solution. Traveling nurses, for example, need 3 to 6 months. Construction people that come into the area, and I know I've run out of time, Mr. Mayor, so I think what I've just provided is some background on where 28 days came from, and I think 90 days would be a great solution. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The next speaker request from Rachel Cedar on the same item, 34.
Good evening, City Council and Mayor. I know that I've been kind of vocal on this issue, so I'll keep this brief because I know we've kind of hashed over a lot of points again and again. But I have kind of three main points that I wanted to bring to your attention. One, low-density residential neighborhoods, and this is kind of a counterpoint to some of the things that I've heard that are against the ADU ordinance. One is that low-density residential neighborhoods currently, you can rent out, your house or parts of your house, or you can have 5 different roommates in your house in any low-density residential neighborhood. So I just kind of wanted to point that out as you're kind of mulling over this ordinance. Another one, I've heard people talk about property values going down. I've looked. And maybe there's more information out there that I haven't seen, but I haven't found anything that actually objectively proves that. And so I just kind of wanted to point that out. If you've seen something, I'd love to see it. And then the third one, I ran upon this morning when I was kind of like looking things over again. I found this report from the AARP, specifically on accessory dwelling units. And it was, this isn't a new concept. This was published in the year 2000. We all remember Y2K. And it was a report titled Accessory Dwelling Units, Model State Act and Local Ordinance. It analyzed 50 local ADU ordinances and kind of looked at how different tenets to those ordinances actually impacted the market and things like that. It wasn't market analysis, but kind of just analyzed the different ordinances that they could find. Their principal findings, this report actually came out very positive, towards ADUs, which was interesting. The year 2000 from AARP, I didn't expect that at all. Principal findings stated, many communities that initially allowed limited ADU development found the experience positive enough to broaden the scope for ADUs. And then the report conclusion stated, ADUs provide a potential resource for addressing these issues by making more effective use of existing housing stock, and I would like to point out infill development, and providing older homeowners with a potential source of income to maintain their independence. So I just thought that was kind of interesting, and I wanted to share that with you guys kind of for your consideration. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. And next, Eric Heikus on item 34.
Good evening, Council and Mayor. My name is Eric Heikus. I live at 1115 West Boulevard. I have no official capacity. This is my own opinion I'm going to be providing you tonight. One time I talked to the mayor when I was on the Sustainability Committee. He said, give me some emotion with this stuff. I want to hear some passion. Tell me why you need this, Eric. And I said, well, this is one example. I'm going to tell you how passionate and excited I am for this. This is an ordinance that I am very excited about, Mayor. So just to be clear. So when I moved into West Boulevard, I bought a house that actually has a very accessory dwelling unit type situation in the back. I bought it so that my mom could live there, and she had a studio there. She lived with her husband part-time. She got sick, she got cancer, and then she didn't live there anymore because she passed. So we were wondering what we were going to do with the studio, we called it. So since then, we've had a budding journalist, an aging musician, and now a fledgling welder, one of my sons, living in the space. It's very adaptable, and it's very convenient, so we're very happy about it. I believe that this ordinance is very significant for our community for many reasons, social being one of them. This encourages diversity in a mixture of generations and races and cultures. It's very sustainable. My core training in LEAD tells me a lot of this can be solved by placing your need and your housing close to your uses, and this does that. Some examples were mentioned about infill, and I salute Mr. Derby's comments about the 90 days. I think that's a positive as well. The kind of users that I can think of right offhand for this would be grandparents, students in the studio, traveling nurses, working part-time grandpas, specific professionals that are here for a short period to do good for our community, single mothers, and then a jump start for young families. As a planner, I would say that this interweaves density into our existing infrastructure beautifully. And it's progressive policy making and a solution for our short-term housing shortfall. And as I recall, you do have the Planning Commission's support. I am a planning commissioner. They voted in favor of it last week. So I see that yellow light flashing, and I am for this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your passion. Okay, on item 35, K.L. McNamara.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor and Council. My name's K.L. McNamara. I own Long Branch Civil Engineering, 821 Columbus Street. I represent the petitioner on this item. Number 35, that's Scott Zanstra. Mr. Zanstra is building a townhouse down on Parkview Drive. If you had the opportunity to drive by Parkview, you'll notice large townhouse on the east side of Parkview. Across the road is the ASA softball complex. Mr. Zanstra has had this townhouse under construction for some time now. It's well beyond a year. And certain issues with getting concrete and things of that nature. When this project started out, what we had was a major drainage easement that was in front of the building. Mr. Zanstra basically started over-excavating for the footings. But to do this, we were required to push the building back such that it was beyond the limits of the major drainage easement. That's how the building ended up 43 feet from the edge of the right-of-way to the front of the building. Push it back out of the major drainage easement. Now, subsequently, I went through the city process and vacated the major drainage easement. But the building is still sitting 43 feet back from the edge of the right-of-way. Now, a strict interpretation of the ordinance tells you that townhouses, if they're set back more than 30 feet from the edge of the right-of-way, can have a maximum approach width of 30 feet. Traditionally, 40 foot is your standard for a townhouse because you have two 20-foot lanes to your garage. If you have a townhouse that's 30 feet or less from the edge of the right-of-way, you get a 40-foot driveway. That's your approach per the ordinance. If you're beyond that 30 feet, which we are, you have to reduce it to the 30-foot maximum width. Unfortunately, the way this worked out, that driveway is out there right now, and it is at full width poured from the house, the townhouse, all the way down to the edge of the sidewalk. It's at 50-foot poured width right now. If the exception is not granted, what we'd be looking at doing is trying to take this 50-foot column of concrete, which is coming down from the building to the sidewalk, and reducing it down to a 30-foot opening for the approach, plus the apron. So what I'm requesting is support of the exception to allow the 40-foot approach width. And there was quite a bit of debate at the Public Works Committee meeting, and I think back and forth, it was generally a pretty good debate, and I had some exhibits, which I won't tire you guys with, that I was trying to sketch on. But in my mind, the idea behind a 30-foot approach width is supported in that, or the 40-foot approach width is supported to focus traffic backing out onto Parkview Drive. In this case, you don't have traffic across Parkview because it's the ASA softball complex. So in a nutshell, if this building was 13 foot closer to the road, I wouldn't need to come and ask you for the exception, but it's not, and therefore we're asking for a grant of the exception. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Hey, thank you. Okay, that is all the speaker requests on items 30 through 40. We'll start with ordinances under item 30. Second reading ordinance 6367 regarding supplemental appropriation number 7 for 2019. Motion to approve by Darla Drew. Second by Chad Lewis. Go to John Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. May I ask a question of the finance officer, please?
Yes, please do.
Thank you. Pauline, I had somebody call me up today, and they wanted to clarify what the, oh, where is it now? I'm sitting here looking. What the item, the $159,744.98 coming out of the storm drainage operations is for.
So when we started that fund, we loaned it some money out of the SAB, I think it was the SAB 28 fund, and it was payable back over 5 years. This is the last year, I believe, on that loan.
Okay.
And it was just for startup costs.
Okay. And that was allocated, it must not have been allocated then, that money, if it's coming out of here? How come, I'm just,
It was a loan to this fund when it first started, so we could hire the people we needed and get going on that utility. And so then over 5 years, we paid it back.
okay. I'm just kind of wondering why it wasn't budgeted. Why is it coming out of this now?
Well, ironically, Mr. Van Cleve sent me the email, and he's like, he missed it. And I said, well, it's the last year anyway, so you don't have to worry about it for 2020. So it's just something that was missed.
$160,000 was just missed. Does that happen quite often? I'm just
Um,
curious.
On some of these internal loans, they are, because we typically just handle it. There's not an invoice that comes in, there's not typically amortization schedules that they have, and so it's just something that the finance office usually takes care of. So yeah, it's possible that
Okay. And this
the
isn't,
internal
this
loans.
isn't going to make any difference towards what was budgeted already, or, you know, we're not going to have to
No.
juggle?
No, they had money in the fund to pay the loan back.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
You bet.
Okay.
I'm finished, Mr. Mayor.
We have a motion to approve? We do. Okay, all in favor of that motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item 31, first reading, ordinance 6368, an ordinance amending section 17.06 of Chapter 17 of the Rapid City Municipal Code, a request by Renner Associates LLC for Lilac Flowers LLC for a rezoning request from General Agricultural District to Light Industrial District for property generally described as being located southwest of the intersection of North Plaza Boulevard and Wesleyan Boulevard. Motion to approve by Lewis and a second by Roberts. All in favor of that motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item 32, first reading, ordinance 6372, an ordinance to amend Chapter 10.48 of the Rapid City Municipal Code relating to parking during snow removal. Motion to approve by Drew, second by Armstrong. Go to Richie Nordstrom.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a minor question on this, and maybe this goes to the either Public Works or to the City Attorney's Office. Just curious about what I refer to as snow hurdles and the removal. How does that work? When we have retailers downtown area are shoveling the snow from the sidewalks, which they normally do, which is a good thing, but it goes out in the street. Then when the snow accumulates, we get this pile of snow right next to the curb, so when the people get out of their vehicles, they have to climb over this hurdle of snow or pile of snow to get to the business. And I was just wondering if there's a way we can address that, or is that addressed within this? And I missed it, so I just
Well, I'll
wondered.
push this off to Public Works Director Dale Tech, but not before I say doing that is impolite to their customers, and there should be a better practice
Yes.
on that sidewalk for moving it into piles or something else. But that's short of a snow alert where we're going to get in there and clean it all up. But we'll go to
Yes.
Dale Tech.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I've described this situation many times, that when we get into the downtown area and pick up snow at night, we don't always call a snow alert. In fact, we've never called a snow alert, but with the weather pattern we in, it looks inevitable that we will this year. We mobilize our crews to get down there at night to clean the snow. If the property owners have not cleaned their sidewalk off and we remove the snow off the street and then they push it out to the curb, that's what causes the snow hurdle. It is not our snow removal operations that are causing the snow removal. It is the lack of the property owners getting the snow cleared in a timely manner. There's many times when we're down there picking the snow up and the sidewalks have not yet been shoveled. So that's part of the issue. As we talked about looking at all of our snow policies this year, Main Street Square, Destination Rapid City, they do some snow removal downtown, and they're going to be a little more vigilant this year. They've assured us of getting down there and trying to help things out, and hopefully that'll have a positive effect on what you're calling snow hurdles.
Thank you. That's what I was looking for, is a resolution on how to deal with that. So, and you're right, Mayor, you're absolutely correct. It's impolite from the property owners or the retail businesses not taking care of that properly. So thank you for the comments.
All right, we have a motion to approve this item. All in favor of that motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item 33, first reading ordinance number 6371 regarding supplemental appropriation number 8 for 2019. Motion to approve by Lewis, second by Lehman. All in favor of that motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 34, first reading ordinance 6363, a request by City of Rapid City to consider an application for an ordinance amendment to allow for accessory dwelling units in residential districts by amending Title 17 of the Rapid City Municipal Code. I understand we have a presentation tonight from Sarah Hansel.
Thank you. We have a short presentation that talks a little bit about the kind of the why behind this ordinance. Why is this an important policy for Rapid City to consider and adopt at this time? And then a sort of a general overview of some of the criteria that are in the ordinance. This may be review for many of you up there, but for anyone who's not familiar with what an accessory dwelling unit is, it is essentially a living unit with its own separate eating, sleeping, and sanitation facilities on a lot that would generally otherwise probably only have one unit on the site. There's a lot of different terminology for these types of living arrangements. You often hear them referred to as granny flats, mother-in-law units, backyard cottages, and in Rapid City particularly, we're expecting many basement apartments because we know that that's a part of our housing stock that we have here in Rapid City. This slide is showing types of ADUs and how they take different formats in neighborhoods, whether they're above in a garage or detached in a small home in the back, attached within a basement or attached as an addition to the home. These are not examples of ADUs from Rapid City, but I do have some photographs later in the slide of some historic ADUs. What's important to point out is that we don't our code today doesn't expressly permit for these types of units. So even though they do exist in many different neighborhoods across Rapid City, they're kind of difficult from a real estate standpoint because we don't allow them. It's difficult to get insurance for them. When someone is trying to request a zoning letter of compliance, it's very difficult for our staff to be able to write those. So we see this as an opportunity to start to work towards housing goals in Rapid City and also create a pathway for these existing units to become legalized and formalized under our current code. So housing is addressed in the comprehensive plan several different fashions. First of all, addressing housing variety. We have a lot of single-family homes in Rapid City, and we're charged with looking at how we can diversify that housing stock, and ADUs are one way that we can do that. This goal recommends introducing a mix of housing types. When you have different sizes, prices, styles, that's when we can really get more diversity within neighborhoods. And I appreciate the comments from Eric Hikas and Rachel Cedar as well for kind of commenting on that in their introductory comments. So the action plan within Plan Rapid City actually says, Rapid City, let's allow accessory dwelling units. Let's come up with some criteria so that we can take a look at where they're fitting in when, but let's allow this as part of our housing stock. So that's what we're aiming to do today with this ordinance. Furthermore, the Rapid City Council in September adopted an affordable housing policy, looking at as many practical and necessary strategies as possible to promote affordable housing situations. And ADUs fit into this. They're definitely not the one-size-fits-all solution to affordable housing. In fact, some of these units may be rented out at relatively high prices, but we know that overall we're adding units to the market, and that's a good thing for affordability. And generally speaking, with these being small units, will be affordable to folks in Rapid City who are making the area median income and trying to spend less than 30% of their income on housing. This slide kind of talks a little bit more about housing policy. We already addressed the comprehensive plan. They can be types of units that a lot of different types of people are interested in. This was brought up earlier as well. It's, seasonal workers, traveling nurses, college students, young people just getting ready to start their family. You know, I read a statistic recently that 30% of households in Rapid City are single people. So for someone, that's a large percentage of the population. We're not talking about necessarily huge families moving into these units, but there's a lot of people who just need a one-bedroom place. The ability to age in place is also really important with this, and that is addressed if you are interested in the AARP study. That's a really great work and highlights a lot of really incredible research about ADUs and different ways that they're handled. But this is a good way for the city to encourage multi-generational housing and allow for people to age in place and have some flexibility where they may live in the primary unit for quite some time and rent out the secondary unit, but then later they're looking for one-floor living, so they move into the smaller unit and rent out their large home to a family. So it's a good way to have a lot of flexibility with your real estate over time. And then also it can provide an income source for homeowners, which can help with that kind of affordability from the supply side. So this is a map of Rapid City and the different residential zoning districts. This ordinance would allow for them, when the criteria is met, in all of the residential districts. So that includes LDR 1, 2, medium density residential, and high density residential. And the medium density residential and high density residential districts already allow for apartment buildings. So these are, there's not as much of that property in Rapid City zone that way, but there are already a lot of renting situations in these districts. The photographs on the right are two examples of historic ADUs in Rapid City. And I do want to point out that there is a specific clause in the ordinance that talks about how properties in the historic district will be addressed. We want to make sure that we're not compromising any of our historic features of our community as part of this. Those should all be taken into the decision making. So the next series of slides goes through some of the main points of our criteria. This gets back to the definition, and most importantly, that these units must have a permanent foundation. So in addition to having their own eating, sleeping, and sanitation facilities, they must be sort of permanently a part of the site. We're not talking about people renting out RVs in their backyard. The second, this is an important issue, this is occupancy. So one of the two units must be owner occupied as shown by Pennington County on the tax rolls. Not all communities manage their ADUs this way, but as we went to public meetings and talked to neighborhood groups and had work sessions with council, this was something that was important to Rapid City and our community to have the owner of the property somewhere on the site dwelling either in the primary unit or in the secondary unit. I touched on this earlier, so I'm going to skip past this one. Area regulations. So this gets into the zoning rules that we have. What are the criteria as far as how much of your lot you can take up, how close you can be to the edge of your lot, these types of things. So just to point out, these units may not be in the front yard. They cannot exceed the lot coverage maximum in the district that they're located in, so that's generally 30%. So they're to the same rules as the single-family home, essentially, the combined total of the ADU and the single-family home. A detached ADU cannot take up more than 10% of the lot area, and if, for any of these standards, if an applicant needs to go or ask for above and beyond that, then they'll seek a variance from the Zoning Board of Adjustment. The detached ADU must be smaller than the primary structure, and if you are an ADU on a lot less than 6,500 square feet, which is our current minimum lot size, then your ADU cannot be detached. There's a provision in this ordinance looking at residential character. So for the larger units in particular, if you have 500 square feet or more, we can kind of take a look at what that is just to see if there may be any concerns. We intentionally left this kind of open at this point. Originally, we looked at language that might say your ADU must match your primary structure. That seemed like that would add on a lot of additional costs and may not really serve the best interest. We want to make sure that these are fitting in with the neighborhood, but not try to regulate that too much from the ordinance standpoint. Parking was an important topic also that came up at our neighborhood meetings. We have written that the unit must provide one off-street parking space that could be dedicated for the ADU. That would be in addition to the 2 parking spaces that are already required for the single-family home. One question that came up often was, particularly for the existing units that are already out there today, how are we going to handle city codes? You have a living unit that was developed maybe a couple decades ago, and they don't meet the current energy code, fire code, building code. You know, we want to ensure that these units are safe for the public to occupy, which is why we're proposing a registration system. But we also don't want it to be overly cumbersome for units that have already been around for a long time. So we are requiring that any new construction or remodeling meet the current day's codes, but we're kind of giving a get out of jail free card, so to say, for those units that are already there today. So we'll look at upgrades and new codes when they come in for building permits, but kind of accept what's there now, getting started once you register. And there also is a provision in the ordinance which specifically identifies that short-term rentals are not permissed through this ordinance. We currently have a 28-day rental minimum, which we've established. So in order to kind of create a mechanism where if we do find out that someone's using it for a short-term rental and they're not in compliance with the code, we have a way to stop that use using our tools that we have in our, using the tools the city attorneys have, I'll just say that. And I mentioned this earlier, you know, for the ADUs that are already out there today, what are we going to look at in order for them to register? So they must meet the definition. Again, that permanent foundation comes into play. They must be owner-occupied. They must be in a residential zoning district, and they can only have one, and they must meet the parking requirement. They must have that one dedicated parking space. And if they can meet these criteria and they're already out there today, we'd like for these folks to come in and register within the first 2 years of passing this ordinance. Or that's probably too soft of language. The ordinance says that within 2 years, you have to come in and register. In order to register, someone would submit a fee set by resolution. This hasn't been determined yet, but it's something we would bring forward to you after this first reading was passed. We just want to look at a simple site plan and a floor plan to make sure that those dedicated living, sanitation, and sleeping areas are established. And then look at those requirements in Section O for parking and owner occupancy. So again, with this registration, we want to register these units, we want to know where they are, but we don't want to be overly cumbersome in what we're asking people to do. Skip over that one, that was more for the online audience. With that, we're available for any questions, and we are recommending to approve this ordinance.
Okay, we'll go to Chad Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Make a motion to approve, please.
Second.
Who was second? Lisa Modrick was second. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, well, I appreciate all the information. I think the third time or so I've heard most of it, but I appreciate all the efforts by the staff to educate us and the public. Initially, I was against this ordinance, but I've taken the time to educate myself as well. Some of my biggest concerns were the ability to finance these units with the real estate, and I did some checking with some underwriters I know that do mortgage underwriting, and they assured me that they looked up the rules that Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae do allow it for conventional mortgages, as well as FHA, and now VA, as of, I think this year, in February, they approved it too, so VA will now allow financing on those units as well. So that was my biggest concern as far as making this ordinance for the realtor standpoint. I do believe that the 28 days thing comes in, just my guess, this is logic, but 28 days probably comes from the fact that February is the smallest month, being 28 days, and so I assume that's why that's in there, so you don't have to do a 30-day, because otherwise, you know, you're losing February. And I think that does take care of the idea that these can be Airbnb units and allow some flexibility with the rentals in case you have people just want to rent for 1 month, or they need to get out after the next month or whatever. So otherwise, I think we're getting too involved in the regulation of how people control their properties for rental purposes. So I'm perfectly comfortable with that 28 days, and I understand why that we do that. And I don't think it's going to allow for any Airbnbs to be that system to be abused. I don't see how it could be. And the covenants are going to take care of a lot of this, folks. If you live in newer areas especially, these things will be regulated just by the overlying covenants, and they may not allow them in the first place. So, you know, if you think you're going to end up with one in your backyard maybe, or your neighbor's backyard, you know, look at your covenants if you're worried about it. I don't think it's possible. Some of the subdivisions I've been to recently. The parking is probably the biggest thing I have a problem with, but I understand that's probably a concern of the neighborhood. I've always just kind of thought the parking was too regulated in this town. I think that people tend to park where they can find places to park, but you know, we got to do something to appease the neighborhoods and keep them happy. So I get that part. So I will be voting for this, and I do really appreciate the staff's, Vicki and Sarah and Director Young's work on this, and I appreciate this coming forward. I do think it's ultimately a good thing. I think it does give a path forward to some of these non-conforming duplexes that are out there currently that are hard to sell and get financing for, because either you have to be an investor with cash or get an investment loan, or now you can get a mortgage, conventional mortgage, because the rules do allow it, especially if you have an ordinance in place that regulates them. So I think it's going to be a win-win for the city, and I do appreciate everybody's efforts. So thank you.
Lisa Modrick.
Thank you, Mayor. May I ask Ken Young a question?
Yes.
Thank you. Hi, Ken. We're finally getting this drilled down. I know you've worked awfully hard, as well as the staff, and Sarah has done such a fantastic job, as well as Vicki, in putting these presentations together publicly. I've got to ask the question so that we can get the question answered by you for Mr. Derby, who says, why 28 days and why not 90? Where was that in the discussion during these public meetings, and why wouldn't that have been considered? Because after all, it is a rental, and if you're renting an apartment, it's usually a 6-month if you're lucky to get in on a term, most are a year. Why did we go so low into 28 days, and why not 90?
Well, I think one of the key things we need to remember with this is whenever we propose an ordinance amendment, we like to have consistency with the existing code. And our existing code does allow, in regular rental situations, 28 days as a minimum standard. So I think we need to look at reasons why we might want to expand or further regulate or provide more restriction on rental opportunities in this, whereas in other rental situations we don't. So I think 28 days does provide sufficient coverage for our concerns, as well as existing codes that we have in place and programs for code enforcement. So I think we're covered, and I think, again, consistency is a good comment here. I don't know, I know Vicki's probably wanting to add some there, but I'll invite her to come up if that's all right.
I always like to hear Vicki. Thank you. Vicki, maybe you should add some more, because that makes a great point that it already exists in one side of an ordinance. Now we're adding this one. Thank you.
Thank you. And that is so true. When the city is looking at how we're going to enforce this, we're setting out that this has to be a monthly rental. And that provision is there today by definition of family in a residence. Regardless if we say that month is 28 days or a 90-day period, the enforcement is there. So if the concern is that we not allow these for short-term rentals, this ordinance addresses it. And our concern with this, and we've been criticized from both sides, is that we're regulating it too much, that we're making it too impossible. Most property owners that are going to lease these sites are going to require a 6-month, or in this town, typically a year lease is required. So I think that 90 days will be short-term compared to what we're going to see.
Thank you. Great answer, and I hope it helps. I think Mr. Derby brought a great point up, and if our ordinance says 28, we've got to align with that. We don't dare go down that road. So thank you. Thank you for the great work, and it looks like progress is happening, and I'm trying to figure out if I've got 6,500 square feet to build a granny house. Thank you.
Darla Drew.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to ask Sarah Hansel a question, please.
Yes.
Hi, Sarah. Last week at Legal and Finance, we talked a little bit about the West Boulevard area, yes. And you said that there would be some kind of a safeguard there in place, maybe the Historic Preservation Commission. How do you see that working in the West Boulevard area?
So it probably depends on what kind of ADU unit you're talking about. So like worst case scenario, you have a contributing structure in the district and someone wants to, I shouldn't even say worst case scenario. So you have a contributing structure and you want to build an addition onto it. Well, where is that addition going to be located? If you put it in the back of the building and it's not visible from the street, there could be a very tasteful, appropriate way to do that that's in character with the building and in character with the rest of the neighborhood. Or it could be awful. It could be on the very front of the house and not match the character at all. So what we have in place right now is called the 11-1 review. That's based on the state law that requires us to do historic reviews. So if someone comes in for a building permit and it's in the historic district, it's flagged. And so our historic program takes a look at it and says, what is this project? Is there a potential that it could damage, destroy, or encroach upon historic property? And if so, what do we do next? So we would essentially evaluate every project that requires a building permit.
For the Historic Preservation Commission, I would like to acknowledge their work to sustain those one-family dwellings in that beautiful area. They've worked very hard to make sure that a lot of those are still one single-family dwellings. So I guess if somebody pulls a permit for the West Boulevard, I think it should have that flag, or at least something in that permit that says it has to go through the Historic Preservation Commission. I'd like to see that as an actual part of that permit. Is that possible?
You're saying, so if someone's pulling a building permit,
in the West Boulevard area, historic district.
Right. Yes, historic review would be required.
Okay.
So if there's a carriage house in the back of a property that already exists now, and perhaps it's already fully set up to operate that way, then there's no building permits required, then that wouldn't get reviewed per historic, but it's already there today.
Okay.
But if it's the carriage house is there, but it's just used for storage and we need to add everything to it, the water and the sewer, and then there would be a historic review because that would require a building permit.
Right, so any additional building would actually have to go through that historic, I don't know, vetting process?
Yep.
Okay. I just needed to hear that from you, so thank you very much. And then I have a question for Mike Derby, if I could, Mayor.
Yeah, please.
I got a few minutes left here. So, Mike, I'm not always familiar with what goes on in the hospitality industry. So tell me, are the hotels renting rooms for 28 days? Does that happen? Do they rent rooms for a month? Is that a fairly common practice?
It depends the time of the year. At our resort, during 6 months out of the year, we do rent them for weekly and monthly rentals.
So for you personally, but how about for the rest of the industry? Is that something that's a concern to the hotels here? The hospitality industry is looking at this as a threat for the 28-day rental?
Well, let me clarify where I'm coming from in regards to that. Is by doing 28 days, and I would like to see in code where the 28 days is specifically written and what it refers to. Because last time I was here, the 28 days had to do with state law, and that's why I provided all of that data in regards to state law. So the 28 days provides 12 rental units, 12 months out of the year, that someone could use this as an Airbnb. Now, they can do a 29-day lease, and maybe during the rally, they would just be there 10 days, but that's just between the owner and how much they want to pay and how much they want to use it. So the concern is people are going to use these at 28 days for an Airbnb. I'm in the business. I get it. That's my competition. I understand it. And I'm doing everything I can in my world to combat that. You just had a groundbreaking for the Civic Center. Where does a lot of that money come from? It's from the BBB. I mean, so we're just looking at it. Yeah, it's protecting my industry a little, but the 28 days is too short in the hospitality industry. It's going to be used for Airbnbs. I guarantee you. I'm just telling you right now.
Okay, Mike, thank you. I'm out of time. So
Okay.
I just didn't understand the hospitality concern in this particular case. Thank you.
Right, thank you.
Bill Evans.
Thank you. I think this ordinance is really well written. Ms. Hansel, I think you guys have done a great job. I also agree with Mr. Derby a little bit as a person who's done Airbnb that it could possibly be used that way, and maybe that needs to be rethought. But the question I have for Sarah is the numbering. It says there's going to be an individual number on every unit, which there should be. Now, if we have 404, 406, 408, 410, 410 is at the end of the block. Somebody wants to put an auxiliary unit at 406, but there are no numbers left. How do we do that?
I'd probably need to defer to the Building Services Division. They kind of handle the exact rules, but it would be 406B, or it would be, I think we try to get away from half units now, but maybe the fire department can address this better than me.
Yeah, I suggested at one of the hearings that we were consistent with this, and whenever there's a housing unit on a site, if it's located at 404, it becomes 404 and a half, not 40 whatever. And then when there's an emergency response or something, or we look at an application for some building permit or something, we know immediately then, because of that half, that it is an auxiliary unit. So I think that would be a good thing to maybe implement into this policy, and that provides consistency throughout. And then we don't have the double whammy. And people know exactly what it is, whether it's a fire response or police response, or again, just approving a building permit. So you might want to incorporate that. So, thank you.
Greg Stroman.
Thank you, Mayor. May I ask Sarah a question, too?
Yes.
Sarah, and I also wanted to commend you and the planning staff for a lot of work that went into this. It's really a very comprehensive, well-written ordinance. But I am kind of a little bit hung up on the 28 days also, and I heard Mr. Young talk about the consistency. I'm not sure what it's consistent with, but is there a detriment to having it extended to 90-day minimum rental? Is there any reason that we wouldn't do that if that was something that would would assist the hospitality industry or the triple B tax?
My concern would be putting limitations on people who really do just need 1 or 2 month living situation. You're going through a divorce, you just moved home from school, all these reasons in life where sometimes you just need a short-term living period. I think that, like Vicki said, what we have in the ordinance already saying that you can't use it for a short-term rental is enough for the city to get involved if it's a nuisance property and they're using it illegally outside of the code.
Okay, thank you.
John Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'm going to surprise the heck out of everybody, and I'm going to support this. I'm just kidding. That was a joke. I think that there's been a lot of hard work put into this, and, I had quite a few concerns about this in the beginning myself. I think there's things that this is going to do that's going to be very beneficial to the city. Unfortunately, I don't think we went far enough as far as the non-conforming duplexes in Rapid, and we're going to still have to deal with that coming up in the future. But what this does allow, and I want to go back to the 28 days real quick, and I know, Mike, you have concerns. As a realtor, I see people all the time that are looking for a month or 2 months because they're buying a house and they're closing quickly and they need somewhere to go and they don't want to go to a monthly motel. And, I think there's a lot of opportunity out there for, people like those. I think there's a lot of good things that are going to happen with this. I think it is going to take some of the non-conforming duplexes out there. I think some people will buy them, because they have the opportunity to put some money back into their mortgage and help them out with their mortgage. I don't think it's going to, like I said, go far enough, though. I think it's going to take care of a small percentage of that. Unfortunately, it's not going to do anything for the investors that want to go out and clean up some of these duplexes, because still we have no ability to do that. So, but hopefully someday we'll get that taken care of. But, I've had a lot of people call me with concerns about, well, we're going to have these in our new neighborhood. Absolutely not. I've talked to quite a few developers that are actually talking about putting in their covenants in the new developments that they're not going to be allowed. You know, I think that there's still going to be a lot of opportunity in Rapid City in the existing areas of Rapid. I think that that alone might fuel, you know, a little better property values on some of these areas that they're kind of depressed right now. And I hate to say depressed in Rapid City because really we're not, but you know, there's some areas that are harder to sell than others. So I think that in all, this is a good ordinance. I think, like I said, we've got a lot of work to go, and especially with affordable housing. Does this help? Yes. Doesn't help enough, but it helps. So thank you very much.
Community Development Director Ken Young.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to briefly address the addressing concern. This is a zoning ordinance, and the opportunity or the authority for making addresses would fall outside of the zoning. So I think what we're saying here is they need to be addressed individually, but exactly how that occurs would probably not be something that we would handle in a zoning ordinance. Also, just wanted to point out again that we've had through this entire process, and I think you could poll the community, and until the day the world dies, it would still remain such that there are those who think this type of ordinance is too restrictive, and there are those who think that this is way too liberal. And so I really feel that through all the time that we have spent on this over the last couple of years or so, and all the opportunities we've had for open houses and public input, that we have found a good medium ground opportunity for this type of zoning and this type of affordable housing, which is strongly needed. So I hope you'll consider that.
Okay, thank you. And now Assistant City Attorney Wade Nyberg.
I just wanted to clarify a little bit about the 28 days. And Mr. Derby handed out a few state laws that are in his handout. One of those is the definition of a transient guest, and that's really related to sales tax, and that's also where the BBB tax comes in. If you rent, whether it's a motel room or a room in a house or an entire house or any kind of apartment, if you rent it for more than 28 days, then there's not going to be sales tax, there's not going to be BBB tax. It doesn't necessarily matter who you rent it from, whether it's at a hotel or an apartment. So I'm not sure that that really makes much of a difference. If you're less than that 28 days, that's where there's a requirement that the person collect the sales tax and the BBB, and also if it's at a hotel, it'd be the occupancy tax for our hotel business improvement district. So anything over those 28 days, and state law doesn't require that tax be collected. So.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion on the floor for approval of this ordinance as is. All in favor of that motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Going on to item 35 under Public Works Committee items. We'll go to Public Works Committee Chair John Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 35, request from Long Branch Civil Engineering Incorporated for an exception for the driveway width requirement for a townhouse with a setback greater than 30 feet per infrastructure design criteria manual. And this went to the council without recommendation.
Chad Lewis.
Make a motion to approve and hold the floor, please.
Okay, we have a motion to approve and a second by Lisa Modrick. Go ahead.
Mr. McNamara, please ask my question.
Yes, please.
Excuse me, no, is this apron already poured, or has it not been poured yet?
No, so the driveway is poured, but the approach apron and the sidewalk has not been poured.
But you did state that you moved the house back to accommodate initially to accommodate the drainage.
Yeah, the house was pushed back to accommodate, to get it out of a major drainage easement, which was vacated. Unfortunately, the footings were dug, but the day that the building permit was actually pulled for the footing and foundation fell like a day after the easement was vacated, but the pole was already in the ground and over excavated.
Okay. Are there any other units on this particular road that are in the 40-foot range?
Yeah, there's all the units next to it.
Pretty much everything on this road is already 40 feet.
If you had a townhouse closer than 30 feet, at the
Sure.
normal setback, they'd all be 24.
I'm just asking, but this isn't something that would be unusual for the neighborhood at this point.
It's not unusual
So,
for townhouses.
so everything basically is 40 feet already, just the ones that are, this one just happened to move back because of the drainage easement. Now you've got that changed, and so you just want it to look more uniform ultimately.
Yeah, it's just going to make
Okay.
it look uniform.
And that's I guess my point being, this isn't some really unusual looking exception we're going to do here. They're going to end up pouring another 13 feet of concrete to accommodate their driveway size, but I have no heartbreak with that. Thank you. I'll be supporting this motion, obviously. Thank you.
Bill Evans.
Yeah, when this came to the committee meeting the other day, Public Works, we did have Mr. Tech explain why it was recommended to not approve it, and I think he would explain that if we asked him to do that again. But my concern was, why are we allowing, in the first place, to create a situation like this where we have a swath of concrete in a residential area that long, that's actually as wide or wider, I believe, than the traffic lanes in St. Joe Street. And that is an enormous aesthetic, ecological, I think, really a bad policy that we allow it to get to that place in the first place in a residential area. And so when they have to come down to narrow the driveway for exit to the street, I think Mr. Tech would, if he would, explain a little better why that is not good for us. Thank you.
Yeah, the primary reason that this exists in our criteria, I think Cale mentioned that certainly at Public Works and earlier on tonight when he spoke during public comment. When you have the townhome pushed back far enough, you've got enough room to make a turning movement on the property itself, so you're not backing in and out of the roadway. You should be able to pull in, turn around, and drive out. So you're driving in, driving out. So that reduces the need for an extra wide driveway. There's plenty of room to maneuver. As Mr. McNabo stated, there's at least a 40-foot long, 50-foot wide driveway. That's 2,000 square feet of pavement. That's plenty of room to make turning movements on. Once again, one of the reasons that this exists in our code. At the end of the day, does it really matter if it's 30 or 40 feet in this instance? Probably not. So I'll just throw that out there.
If I could say one more thing, I think we need to think about how we put the developers in these situations in the first place, that they have to come to us. Perhaps if there were some changes in what we require in the first place, then they wouldn't have these sort of situations set up. And maybe we need to revisit some of those policies in the future for the betterment, aesthetically, and also drainage and everything else, the problems that come from such giant expanses of concrete. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion on the floor to approve the request. All in favor of that motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Now on to community development items. Item 36, a request by KTM Design Solutions for Justin Henrichsen for a preliminary subdivision plan for a proposed Lot D of Lot 3A and Lot D of Lot 3B of Marshall subdivision, generally described as being located northwest of the intersection of Glendale Street and Homestead Street, and the committee recommendation was to approve with stipulations. And we'll go to Richie Nordstrom first.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll make the motion to approve this with the amendment to change Glendale to Glenside is the actual street where this is located. Glenside, because I don't think we have a Glendale Street within Rapid City. That's my motion.
So you think this is a typo?
Yes.
Any confirmation on this? Dale Tech is checking.
I'm sorry I didn't get this to you sooner, but it was a heavy workload today.
Okay, so Richie Nordstrom made a motion to approve with the exception of the street name, and Chad Lewis was the second.
No, I'm not seconding that.
Okay. Second by Darlene. Okay, second by Lance Lehman, the gentleman from Ward 4. Okay, what's the correct street? Glenside
Street.
Street. Okay, so the council should ignore the typo in the printed agenda. It is Glenside Street, and we have a motion and a second. We'll go to John Roberts.
Thank you. I just didn't get out last time.
Okay, all in favor of the motion to approve, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 37, request by Renner Associates LLC for Schoolhouse LLC for a preliminary subdivision plan for proposed lots 1 and 2 of Pioneer Subdivision, number 3, generally described as being located at 9340 Clarkson Road. And the recommendation from committee was to approve with stipulations. Okay, we have a motion by Nordstrom to approve and a second by Darla Drew. All in favor of that motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 38, a request by Fisk Land Surveying and Consulting Engineers for Keys Larson, sorry, for a preliminary. That's what I get for bringing so much attention to a typo earlier. Keys Larson for a preliminary subdivision plan for proposed lot 5 of Block 3 of Dunham Estates, generally described as being located west of the intersection of Hideaway Court and Hideaway Lane, and the recommendation is to approve with stipulations.
Move to approve.
Okay, Stroman makes a motion to approve with stipulations and a second by Lance Lehman. All in favor of that motion say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item 39. A request by Renner Associates LLC for Lilac Flowers LLC for a preliminary subdivision plan for proposed tract T of Fountain Springs Business Park, generally described as being located southwest of the intersection of North Plaza Boulevard and Wesleyan Boulevard, and the recommendation is to approve stipulations. Okay, motion to approve by Nordstrom, and there was a second by Stroman. All in favor of that motion say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 40 is the 2020 alcohol beverage license renewals. It has 58 licenses attached. I have conferred with the police chief on these, and there are no concerns with these. Okay. We have a motion to approve by who?
Me.
Lewis made the motion, and Armstrong made the second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. And I apologize, is Vincent Baker here? Did you want to speak on this item 43, sir? Yes, sir. Okay. I failed to call on you earlier when I should have. This is Vincent Baker on item 43. Oh, I'm sorry.
Council, Mr. Mayor, thank you so much for allowing me to speak. My name is Vince Baker. I'm the general manager of Arrowhead Country Club here in Rapid City. I just recently, within the last 6 months, moved to your beautiful community, and it has proved to be a very nice place for my wife and I. The one thing that I had not noticed when I came here are some of the liquor laws that are different from some of the states that I've worked in the past, such as Texas, Louisiana, and North Carolina. And that being said, I wanted to make sure that what I was trying to do was to follow the law in regards to selling wine after a vintner's dinner is what I'm most likely looking for. I'm not looking to do day-to-day beverage sales. I'm looking to do special event sales so that, for instance, if somebody came to a vintner's dinner and we brought out 5 different wines from a given vineyard, that they would be able to purchase some after the fact, and then I order them from the distributor. They'd come in, and I give them to them, a few days later. That's all I'm looking to do. I just didn't want you to think, well, gosh, you've had a liquor license for 65 years. Why you change it now? I'm just trying to add to our services available to our members and our guests.
Sure. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure meeting you the other night when you were there about 4 months ago.
Okay, thanks. Boy, I am all messed up. Okay, public hearing items. See, I made a mistake. I thought I made a mistake earlier, and my mistake was thinking I made a mistake. Let that be the part of the record. Oh, man. Public hearing items, items 41 through 49. Now there are no speaker requests on these items since we had Mr. Baker come up prematurely, but we got his point. So these consent public hearing items 41 through 46 are now on the table. Would there be a motion for these items? Motion to approve by Lehman, second by Armstrong for items 41 through 46. All in favor of that motion say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Now into non-consent public hearing items 47 through 49. Item 47, second reading, Ordinance 6364, an ordinance amending Section 17.06 of Chapter 17 of the Rapid City Municipal Code, a request by AAB Engineering, LLC for Roop Helmer Group for a rezoning request from General Agriculture District to General Commercial District for property generally described as being located east of Haynes Avenue, just north of Catherine Avenue. And we'll go to Darla Drew.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question for Dale Tech on, I guess, kind of all of these 47, 48, and 49.
Okay.
Mr. Tech, when we look at these things that are being changed from General Agricultural District, are we thinking anything about wetlands? Because I've had some concerns from constituents that we are bulldozing bogs and marshes and those kinds of things as we go forward, and I have never heard this question brought up before in regards to agricultural land.
All of the land that surrounds the city of Rapid City, this is more of a zoning question, but I'm going to take a stab at it.
Okay,
And
all right,
Ken
okay.
can kick me if I'm wrong, but when land comes into the city, Rapid City, from the boundary, it's typically agricultural land. That's the way the city grows. I'm assuming this land was no different, that it came into the city a long time ago. It was identified as agricultural property. At the time it came in, it was zoned such. In the meantime, the city has developed future land use plans and zoning maps to identify what future zoning would be in those areas. So this is just a change from what it was to what it should be per our planning maps that we have. Certainly any wetlands that exist out there, there are federal laws on the books that protect those wetlands from being filled in, and if they are, they need to be mitigated, typically at a 2-to-1 ratio. So there are rules and regulations in place to help preserve those wetland areas, and then certainly if there's any natural drainage areas, those need to be preserved just to convey surface stormwater. So we have rules in place to address those issues that you mentioned. And now I believe Mr. Young would like to say a few words.
Okay, before you get in here, Ken, I think of Rapid Valley as an entire drainage area for the Black Hills and for Rapid City. So as we expand more into those areas, these things concern me as to, how people are using that land and spending their money and building on lands that might not be the best. They might be a natural bog. And so I'm a little concerned about that, and also we're losing that ecosystem. So if you could expand a bit. Ken?
Oh.
Yeah, I'm going to Ken now. Okay.
Okay.
Ken Young.
Sorry.
All right, well, in regards to that, I think it's a good idea, or it's a good thing to remember that a lot of our agricultural land is zoned as such because it's being considered a holding zone. So we have, through our comprehensive plan, identified a lot of these areas that are currently zoned agriculture for future development uses. This particular land has been zoned or land use designated through the comprehensive plan as urban neighborhood, which does provide for this type of zoning. So there certainly are those environmental and drainage type issues that will need to be looked at, and we will do that as the development proposals come forward. But just specifically with this property in mind, it has been looked at for quite some time as potential for commercial development.
Just know that in future, I would really like to see maybe a little bit more information on the wetlands as we go into Rapid Valley. I've had some complaints from people that say bogs are being bulldozed over. I'm not saying it's true or not. I'm just saying that that's some comments that I've gotten, and so I'd like to just have that addressed as we're looking at these areas, because it is a concern of mine and for sustainability in this area, especially with these really fragile ecosystems. So thank you. I yield.
Okay, John Roberts.
Thank you very much. And I don't know if Ken or who wants to touch on this, or maybe I'll just touch on this. When that does happen, when you have development where there is wetlands that have been identified by the Corps of Engineers, then they have to be replaced, like Dale said, at a 2-to-1. Sometimes there's wetlands out there that may just be somewhere that holds water that hasn't been identified by the Corps of Engineers. Anybody can go out there, fill that in, as long as it hasn't been identified. We are not losing any wetlands. We never lose any wetlands. If it's been identified by the Corps of Engineers, it gets replaced at a 2-to-1 ratio. And, you know, that is very, very expensive to the developer when they are doing projects in an area like this. They go into it knowing what they're going into. A lot of times they work around those wetlands because they're so expensive to mitigate. So that's a fallacy saying that we're losing wetlands, because we are not. The federal government is very, very stringent about that. If it is identified wetlands, it is getting replaced. So I just wanted to make that of record. Thank you.
Okay, Richie Nordstrom.
Thank you, Mayor. If I can add on as well to the previous comments, is if I recall correctly, and Mr. Tech can correct me on this, but we also have to do soil testing. And so before any housing, specifically for housing, if we have to do any housing development, that soil has to be tested as well. So if the tests don't follow the results don't follow the guidelines, then they can't build there. So, and if Mr. Tech needs to correct me, I'm all ears. He's quiet. Thank you.
Okay, I believe we don't have a motion on this item. Motion to approve by Lewis, and who was the second? Lehman was the second. All in favor of approval say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item 48, second reading, 6365, an ordinance amending section 17.06 of Chapter 17 of the Rapid City Municipal Code, a request by KTM Design Solutions for G&G Investments, LLP, for a rezoning request from Office Commercial District to Medium Density Residential District for property generally described as being located north of DeGeest Drive. Motion to approve by Robertson, second by Modrick, and we'll go to Richie Nordstrom.
Thank you, Mayor. This is including the following one. I'm very interested in the master plan for this area, and I would just want to make sure that everybody understands. And Ken, again, correct me if I'm wrong in this error here, is that since the mayor set a precedent for this evening in errors, so I just wanted to make sure that this will be showing up in a master plan at some point. We will get to see will we get to see that master plan as well? A couple of questions for Ken Young, please.
Yes.
I'm going to let Vicki Fisher address that.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the rezones are in association with the future development of this property, and as a part of the plat review for this site, we have identified what the street networking needs to look like, and they have in fact submitted a master plan. The original one did not have the street connections as per the major street plan. We have put the developers on notice that that needs to be changed to correct it, or they would need to bring forward a comprehensive plan amendment to the major street plan, which would come back in front of you. So we're working with them to get this aligned with our major street plan.
Mayor, if I follow-up question. This is probably not related to this issue, but the other factor that needs to be considered is the water pressure in this area. Is that part of the stipulations? Forgive me, I didn't see it in there, but is that a separate issue?
So for the items before us today, obviously for the rezone, we can't approve a rezone with stipulations, but with the associated preliminary subdivision plan, yes.
Okay.
There's definitely stipulations that address the water, sewer, drainage, which we always call out in a report. If there are floodplain or wetlands associated with any future development, if you read those great reports, and the water is addressed in there as well, Richie.
Thank you. I yield.
Ken Young, Community Development Director.
Thank you, Mayor. I did want to mention, Councilwoman Darla Drew mentioned a couple meetings ago that it would be beneficial for the council to have more information in regards to the development on the east side of town. And so we are working on that. I think there are a lot of properties such as this and others in that area that are part of master plans, or some that are not, but that fit in with the existing ones. And so we are going to be coming forward probably to both Public Works and Legal Finance to address this so that everybody can get a better feel as to what's going on out there with not just zoning and such, but actual master plans of development.
Okay, thanks. We have a motion to approve item 48. All in favor of that motion say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item 49, second reading. Ordinance 6366, an ordinance amending section 17.06 of Chapter 17 of the Rapid City Municipal Code, a request by KTM Design Solutions for G&G Investments, LLP, for a rezoning request from General Commercial District to Medium Density Residential District for property generally described as being located north of Neil Street. Motion to approve Nordstrom, second by Drew. All in favor of approval say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes. And item 50, the bill list, will go to Finance Officer Pauline Sumption.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There are no additions to the bill list, so the total is that which is attached at $6,378,301.32.
Move to approve.
Motion to approve Lewis, second Lehman. All in favor of approval say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Armstrong and Roberts, first and second. All in favor say aye. Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you.